Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and tonight I am here just to help you relax, to drift off to sleep by the sound of the waves, like the whispers of old souls. I know you have come to this video not just to hear the story, but also to find a deep, peaceful sleep. But before we begin, please gently like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to tell you strange stories under the dim moonlight. Where are you from? And what time is it where you live? Just relax. Let your body relax. Put all your worries down by your pillow. Let me take you into a world of mysteries where the wind and the waves mingle, and unsolved mysteries are waiting to be told. Are you ready? A decently modest proposal. Hey you! Yes, you, reading this story. Don't worry, this isn't some piece of meta-fiction. I'm dictating what I say to a gracious volunteer who will post it for me. I've got an offer for you. And no, not like a door-to-door salesman peddling dull kitchen knives or what have you. You see, my offer is as genuine as a baby's first laugh. My name is Donald Basemore Cooper. Quite a mouthful, I know. My friends call me Donnie, DB, Coop, Basement, and so on. Take your pick. They're like paint samples. But the people I do business with, oh, they call me a lifesaver. Believe it or not, old Donnie here knows a thing or two about you. I'd wager 9 out of 10 of the people reading this are sitting down. Maybe you're lucky, number 10 though, standing up at work, browsing your phone, blessed enough to have clicked this offer. Maybe your job doesn't let you sit down like a cashier or that guy who takes the stubs off movie tickets. Regardless, whether you're sitting or standing, you'll realize that your feet probably hurt. Maybe a little, maybe a lot. Maybe sitting down is just a temporary oasis from the desert of swollen soles and pained pinky toes. But we've all been there. We all know what it's like to have our dogs barking. Think about it. From the moment you were born, your mommy or your daddy had a countdown going for the day you'd take your first steps. Maybe they even filmed it, a joyous occasion to look back on. But was it really? Because after that, you might have found walking fun for a year or two. Then you might have graduated to running, sweating off the sugar highs you'd get from your candies and such. But at some point, I'm confident walking and running just became, vanilla, plain and simple, boring even. Hell, I'm taking it one proverbial step further, and guessing it's just plain tiring too. Now, as an adult, say you can't find a parking space close to where you need to go. Now you gotta walk. Or maybe the bus station isn't that close to where you work. We haven't exactly designed cities around those of us without cars. Maybe your job keeps you on your toes. Go run this, go clean this, Go serve that table of assholes their food, knowing they won't tip you. More walking, and even if you try and relax on a weekend, guess what? How long can you last until you go shopping at a store, or even a mega shopping center, floor after floor, dedicated to glorious capitalism, a shrine to enjoyment and consumerism? But your feet will have hell to pay. And I know I can hear some of you thinking to yourselves, but Donnie, I like to walk, run, and jog. Hell, I eat marathons for breakfast. I hear you. I promise you still gotta listen to my offer. You see, why do we do those things? If you ask me, it boils down to 3 different reasons. First reason, maybe you like an early morning stroll through the woods because you gotta de-stress. It's calming, serene, reminds you of your mama's womb. I get that. But it can't be the only way you know how to de-stress. I'm sure your buddies, the bed and the couch, would like to chime in and remind you how relaxing they are. And if you still want to be in nature, watch a bird or 2. Park benches are right there, singing a siren song to rest your feet. Second reason, weight loss. You want to be sexy. You want to look thin. You gotta shave those pounds off of you. But I'm sorry to say, it's really all a sham. Society made up these rules as to who counts as hot, who gets to be on the big screens and such. They want you to look thin because there's more money for them in looking thin. Exercise machines, designer clothes, beauty products, all that costs way more than a bag of chips and cookie dough, if you know what I'm saying. And then they have the gall to make food so tasty, yet so fattening, to keep this endless cycle going. You pay money to get thin, only to pay money to get fattened again. That's the secret to beauty. It's just money wearing a mask. Don't fall for it. Live how you want. Don't worry about running to get thin. Reason the third. Maybe you run for sport. You know, it happens. You could have had a lazy eye and couldn't hit or throw a ball right. But boy howdy, you sure could run like hell in a straight line. Now, your pal Coop here wasn't much of an athlete. Most of my running came from evading the school bullies, who are now, hopefully, adult has-beens and burnouts. But that spirit of competition is a wonderful thing. It's food for the heart and soul. But it won't last. Sooner or later, your body gives out, and you'll just be yearning for the glory days, like a college alum still visiting their frat house on homecoming. You can't run forever, so you see where I'm coming from now? Almost everyone reading this declaration of mine is going to tragically fall victim to one day being so pained, so hurt, so egregiously tired, all from walking. Biologically speaking, we aren't even designed to be standing up straight for so long. Our spines are an affront to God, if anything. So, what do we do? What is Mr. Basemore Cooper here leading up to? What is my offer to you, my dear reader? Well, let me tell you a story. Growing up, my grandfather, or my Boompa, as I called him, lived on his own. He'd come visit me, walking up the 3 stone steps to my house, back and knee pains the whole time. Of course, I didn't know at the time how much he hurt. He was just Boompa to me, so friendly, so kind, bringing over an apple or 2 to help keep the doctor away for me, you know? As a kid, I'd run around the house or the yard, trying to play with Boompa, never realizing how he struggled to catch up. Then, inside, I'd jump on his lap as he sought relief on our couch. He's the one who taught me my dogs are barking instead of saying my feet hurt. Hell, he'd put a spin on it with the whole pound is a barking Donnie, and then he'd leave to go home to his apartment, up several flights of stairs, all by himself. And I'd beg him to stay. Please, Boompa, I want to play every day. And I'd wonder why my parents were just letting him go off by himself. In retrospect, it's even worse. They had to have known his legs were hurting, but they basically kicked him out into the cold every time he finished visiting. Why couldn't Boompa just live with us? Would it really have been that hard? Don't you get ahead of yourselves, dear readers. There isn't some skeleton in Boompa's closet. No sins of the grandfather. No wicked reason why baby Donald couldn't see him every day. The real reason? Independence. As long as he could walk, he insisted on taking care of himself, living on his own, and thus seeing me only a dozen times a year. Tragic, right? Your hearts must be breaking. Boo-hoo for Donnie? Nah, I should get that I was still lucky to even have Boompa. But you know who wasn't lucky? Boompa. Knees sore, feet aching. A lifetime of walking amounting to chronic pain. It really shouldn't be a surprise that he couldn't cross the street at a normal speed. So if you think about the number of stupid people combined with the number of impatient people in this country, it was really only a matter of time. Boompa couldn't possibly react fast enough to that car. Don't grab your tissues and start weeping. He lived. It's actually funny how tires crushing your bones, grinding your flesh, and spilling your blood across the pavement isn't enough to kill you sometimes. I wonder if Boompa found it funny too, lying there, waiting for the ambulance, dragging himself away from the mangled remains of his legs. Just a clean cut, the kind that would make a butcher blush with how precise it was. Just like that. No more legs and feet to hurt. Just like that. Boompa was at home, my home, to live with us. I could talk to him all day. My parents would take care of him, and he'd never have to walk again in his wheelchair. I couldn't be happier that he lived out the last few years of his life with us, fully provided for and loved. I'm sure he'd agree. I'll have to ask him when I go to heaven. And we could have had all that for longer if he had just gotten rid of his legs sooner. Don't you think? What I'm proposing is a free service, all done by me on the house, to give yourself the same kind of life Boompa had at the end, fully taken care of, free from the stress of walking. You'll find new ways to relax, new games to play to pass the time, and losing weight? Well, a leg is a little under a fifth of your weight, so losing both? You're talking upwards of 50 pounds off, all at once, way more efficient that exercise ever could be. Come on. Working out is hell. All the sweat and the pains and finding time to do it. I'm telling you, my offer is way better than that. You might be hesitant because you don't have a spare wheelchair lying around. No worries. Part of the service is that I'll help you procure one suited just to your needs. What about housing? Making sure you can still move around. Your boy Donnie is right here. We can rearrange your house to be a more wheelchair-friendly space. What's that? Your job? Going out in public? Right now, I'm working on pushing the government to pass legislature to increase disability pay. Most public places have to be wheelchair accessible already, but with an increase to monthly payments, you'll have more than enough free money to use on both living and entertainment. You'll see, it really won't be a big deal to use ride-sharing services once you have the money from selling your car. How is the procedure done? Well, there are too many hoops to jump through to doing this in a hospital. God forbid us red-blooded Americans exercising the freedom we've been promised. I'll gladly come to your house instead. Just give me your address, and we'll pick a time that works best for you. Maybe you want the kids out of the house. Maybe you've been looking for an excuse to get off of work on a Monday. Certainly won't be going back to that job after we're done. I've got my bag of tools with me here. We've got some chloroform here, a new set of rags, some ropes too. I find it decreases the squirming if you happen to wake up. You don't have to worry about carpet stains either. I'll throw down a tarp. We could even set you up in bed for maximum comfort as well. Then you've got your choice of tool. The chainsaw is a wonderful choice for those horror fanatics out there. Plus, the noise will drown out any screaming that might occur. Again, if you wake up. But maybe you want quick and painless, or at least as painless as possible. That's where the elegant Japanese katana comes in, fully capable of slicing through bone. Maybe you want to savor the moment you give into a lifetime of relaxation and sitting. Or maybe you find your jollies from a little bit of pain here and there. No judgment here. But I've still got my trusty hacksaw here, still good to go from the first time I did this procedure. Now, the forums will tell you that a bone saw might cut better, but ignore that hogwash. With enough elbow grease and a can-do attitude, my hacksaw and I will easily get your legs on a one-way trip to Aruba, never to bother you again. Don't you worry a hair on your pretty head. I know what I'm doing here. It's not my first rodeo. I've had plenty of satisfied customers in the past. It does take a little convincing, but if you met me in person, my pearly white smile would knock your socks off. Be warned, ladies, I'm quite the charmer. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up chit-chatting mid-procedure too. Why, yes, I'd love to take you out to dinner in your fine new wheelchair this Friday. I'll hold the door open for you and make sure you get home safe before I lift you and tuck you into bed, nice and snug. Now, in full honesty, not everyone is fully on board with this procedure yet. But I really am doing people a huge favor here. The couple of times they hesitated to say yes didn't stop me from grabbing the old chloroform here. I remember this one gentleman, surely an upstanding and strong man, didn't hesitate to start crying and begging me to stop once he was tied down. Those tears reminded me a lot of myself when I used to cry when Boompa left. Oh, how things got better for me. And soon they'd get better for him too. In fact, this young gentleman typing this all out is my latest customer. You see, I'm not the best with computers, so we cut a deal. He could keep one of his legs if he helped me spread my word far and wide. So here we are. If only you could see him hobble, a little tear in his eye. There won't be any tears once he moves into his wheelchair, with my help, of course. I'm not a monster, after all. So folks, if you're interested in changing your life for the better, taking a stand against pain by sitting down permanently, then I'm your man. For Donald Basemore Cooper, call 555-NO-LEGS-FOR-ME. You want to be free? Call your pal DB and make sure you hold on to those legs once they're off you, because I've got a great home recipe to share with you in the kitchen, the Pen Ultimate. It was a bit of a shock to see Sophie again at the door on a Thursday evening during the pre-news sitcoms, because by all accounts, she was quite dead. Peter Lander distinctly recalled kissing her passionately, bittersweetly even, because it was their last kiss, and he knew it even if she didn't, right before he blew her brains out with his Colt python. He knew he was right, because Eileen made a big fuss. Why the hell did you kiss her? She's my wife. Not anymore. True. And given the insides of her skull confettied all over the living room, and that later that week, they put the rest of the package 6 feet under. And then a day after that, they collected on the staggering life insurance. Yes, Sophie was dead. She had to be. And yet, "Hello, Peter," said Sophie, standing at their door. Said Peter. Dirt dribbled from her dress and hair, and actually, she was covered in dirt. No makeup, but her hair was done up, and frankly, she looked like she might just have gotten back from a rainy rugby match, which she for some reason played in her funeral dress. And maybe she was a little paler than usual. Oh, and she had that gaping hole in her forehead, of course. Sophie rolled her eyes, pushed past him, and muttered something about, "Why don't I let myself in?" Peter followed her to the kitchen, where Eileen was making herself a vodka cranberry. "Oh my God," said Eileen. Her tone was shocked, but not the kind of shocked you get when you see a dead person walking around, but rather when you see the wrong dead person walking around, like when you're in line at the express checkout, but the old guy in front has more than 10 items, and it's noisy, and the AC doesn't work, and a greasy tween elbows you in the boob and doesn't even notice, much less apologize. "Peter, what the hell? She just showed up," he said with a shrug. "What do you want from me?" "Right," said Sophie. She placed a briefcase on the kitchen table, her lawyering briefcase from back when she was alive, and a lawyering, and unclasped it. "Gather round. Family meeting time." Peter and Eileen sat, though she huffed and crossed her arms and kept the vodka at hand. "Are you even part of our family anymore?" Eileen asked. Sophie glared her silent. Then she pulled out piles of papers, old yellow paper, covered in horrid red ink, all over the table. "Soph," Peter said. And then he winced. He never really knew how to broach deeper topics with her, which was maybe why their marriage was so-so. What's happened to you? Are you a ghost?" "She's obviously a zombie," Eileen snapped. "I told you to use the shotgun, but did you listen?" "No." Sophie drew herself up and sniffed. "I am not a ghost, Peter. Ghosts aren't real." Out of her briefcase, she pulled out, reverently, a ruby-red fountain pen. Except it wasn't merely ruby red, it was ruby, with a gold nib, and placed it gently beside her. "Neither am I anything so gauche as a zombie," Eileen pouted. "I am a revenant." Peter and Eileen shared a look. "What's a revenant?" he asked. "I'll put it this way. When I ran into the devil in hell." "Told you lawyers went to hell," Eileen said, sneering. Sophie cleared her throat. "When I ran into the devil, I made a deal with him. He'd let me come back as an undead murder machine so that I could wreak unholy vengeance on those who wronged me. You know, tear you limb from limb, eat your heart, and drag your sorry soul back down with me. kind of one last big hurrah in the world of the living. Peter gulped. Eileen dropped her glass, which wobbled on the table and spilled all over her lap. "Thing is," Sophie continued, holding up a parchment covered in bloody writing, "I've gone over this contract hundreds of times, and as soon as I kill you, I go back too." But not until she took a couple fresher-looking sheets of yellow paper and slid them across the table, one each for Peter and Eileen. "So, I'm willing to offer you a deal. Feel free to read over that. But the gist is, I don't murder you. And in exchange, I get to live here and get access to the millions from my life insurance policy." Peter looked at his paper and gulped. "Is this written in blood?" "It's Lucifer ink, by Lucifer ink," Sophie said. Then, with a distant look in her eyes and an unsubtle tremble, she added, "Blood tends to boil down there. Oh, it is written on human leather, though." Peter and Eileen dropped their papers. "What if we don't sign?" Eileen asked. "Then I murder you now and drag your soul down to hell. Can we just shoot you again?" Peter asked. "Technically, yes. But come on, Peter. Use your thinking brain. I'm already dead. Even if you managed to destroy my body by blowing it up or something, I'd just come right back, like some cheesy slasher flick. And the neighbors would probably complain about the noise." Oh, Peter and Eileen held quiet counsel for just a moment, wiggling their eyebrows and making meaningful expressions at each other. Of course, since Sophie knew them both intimately, one as a husband and the other also as a mistress, their secret language was no secret to her. She lay her ruby pen before them. "What kind of pen is that?" asked Eileen. "A pen par excellence. The pen ultimate. The devil's very own quill. Utterly binding on a soul level. I might have swiped it from his desk." "What? Don't look at me like that. It's not like I can possibly get into even more trouble." What choice did they have? They signed. Then for a second, they shimmered in a red glow and experienced a pang of bowel distress. And it was done. And Sophie moved back into the house she paid for. Her old firm wouldn't take her back when she called. "No offense, Soph. And I mean that. You were one of the best, for sure. It's just people already see us as ghoulish. And if we brought you back, well, it'd no longer be libel, would it?" So she plopped herself down on the living room couch, right in the middle, so Peter and Eileen couldn't cuddle up on it while watching a nice rom-com or something. Not that they watched rom-coms, because Sophie had control of the remote, and she binged trashy reality TV 24 hours a day. "Maybe someone else would want to watch something," Eileen said. "Maybe someone else should get a job and buy the TV," Sophie snapped. And 24 hours a day really was 24 hours a day, since Sophie didn't sleep. "You mind turning that down at night?" Peter asked, after he caught himself humming a reality theme song in the shower. "It's just, I can't sleep." "Yes, Peter," said Sophie. "I do mind." And then she cranked the volume up. The only thing that competed with the blaring TV was the shrill ding of the doorbell, going off like clockwork. Also, at all hours of the day. Having some free time, for perhaps the first time in her life, Sophie crawled the online shopping sites and splurged on whatever caught her eye. After all, her life insurance money was as much hers as anyone else's. And given this was her retirement, she had nothing to save for. The lack of responsibility felt liberating. The living room was soon filled with unread books, unworn clothes, unwatched movies, unexercised workout machines, and uneaten chocolate. Somewhere, she even found a life-size alabaster unicorn, whose horn scratched up the low ceiling. And because she refused to budge from the couch, muttering something about the sentimental value of it being the place her brain was ejected, it fell to Peter and Eileen to get the deliveries. It was exhausting in their spare moments. Peter and Eileen mostly stuck to the kitchen, where the blaring TV was at least a little muted. Having company over was difficult, because all their friends understandably kept bringing up the Sophie situation. And frankly, it was getting embarrassing explaining themselves over and over and stressing that the living room was Sophie's room, and so it was best to leave it be. Eileen hit the bottle increasingly hard, and Peter took up smoking again. Easy, since Sophie no longer nagged him about it. "This isn't working for me," Eileen said one night. Peter nodded. "This isn't how I pictured our early retirement." Peter nodded again. "Are you listening to me?" "Christ, yes. What do you want from me?" "I want the life of luxury I was promised. I want to be able to host our friends with swanky parties." She pouted. "I want my yacht." Peter rolled his eyes. "Don't you dare," he sighed and massaged the bridge of his nose. "It's not ideal, is it? What can we do? I thought we were rid of her." "Be nice." "No," said Eileen. "I'm sick of this. I wish we never signed that stupid contract." "Well, she would have murdered us. And, you know, the whole hell thing, whatever." Then Eileen's eyes lit up. "Hey, maybe there's a loophole. Where's the contract?" Stealing Sophie's briefcase wasn't too hard, what with the TV blaring, and her attention focused entirely on the very real antics of the very real people on display. They brought it back to the kitchen for some privacy and started going through the papers. Sophie's contract with the devil was huge. It took them a solid week to go through it. A week made all the harder by the constant interruptions from deliveries. But finally, on Friday, they hit on something. Footnote 28397, Peter read. "Note that the Revenant has license to seek revenge on exactly one former aggressor. As soon as such an aggressor is slain, the Revenant contract is concluded, and both souls become the property of Lucifer Inc. Note that collateral damage is permitted." "What's that mean?" Eileen asked. "I'm reading. Hold on. Basically, If she blows us up or something, that's fine too. The contract's done when one of us dies, but there's no penalty, I guess, if we're both dead. Super. So very encouraging. Shh. Wait. There's more. Peter adjusted his glasses and took a drag on his cigarette. Note also that the contract will be concluded if any of the aggressors should die by any means, whether caused by the revenant or not. This includes, but is not limited to, traffic accidents, war, acts of God, peanut butter, old age, or being murdered by someone else. Said Eileen, setting her drink down. Said Peter. What do you suppose that means? I guess, Eileen hedged, if one of us were to die, then... Peter set his cigarette down on the table. He locked eyes with Eileen, and neither blinked, as an ad for an energy drink roared in the background. At once, she flew at the counter, and he dived for the pantry. And they both kicked over their kitchen table. Eileen grabbed the first things available to her, a cutting board covered in raw, soon-to-be schnitzels, and a gory meat tenderizer. She flung the floppy meat patties across the room and roared, hoisting her tenderizer into the air. And then, with a shriek, brought her cutting board up, just in time to block the worst of a volley of canned pinto beans. Peter charged her with a battle cry, holding a jumbo can of tomato juice with both hands. He leapt at her, right as she swung. Her tenderizer savaged his temple, but he tackled her. I think we should see other people, he roared, bringing his can of tomato juice down and down again. Eileen screamed, desperately blocking with her cutting board and flailing her face tenderizer, until it finally connected with his jaw. It was enough for her to push him off and then roll on top. And now Peter was on the defensive. It's not you, it's me, she cried. And each time her weapon came down, torrents of blood, or tomato, it was hard to tell, splattered everything. They rolled again when Peter was able to get a hold of a raw schnitzel and shove it into her face. And then again, when she managed to can opener his ear. And on it went, until they both flopped onto the kitchen floor, gasping for breath, covered in cuts and bruises and meat. Truce, he wheezed. Yeah, she managed, and then coughed. I thought killing was supposed to get easier after the first one. Hey, do you smell that? Eileen sniffed. Is something burning? Laboriously, they both sat up and found their kitchen to be on fire. The worst of the blaze was their table, which had been covered in Sophie's dry old contracts, Eileen's liquor, and Peter's lit cigarette. Oh, hell, he muttered as the flames drew closer. Then they both screamed for help. Sophie ignored them at first, because their drama was just too much, and nowhere near as interesting as TV. But it grated on her enough that she finally rose off the couch. By then, the kitchen was a conflagration, with nary any raw meat in sight. Neither schnitzel nor Peter and Eileen. Damn it, she said, planting her hands on her hips. You two are just the worst. And then she exploded into a cloud of sulfur and flame, and the house burned down. The fulfillment, swaths of red and blue, intermittently flooded my vision. Beneath the flimsy plastic, my limbs still pulsed with adrenaline. Initially, the barrage of sirens and shouts was an audible assault. But now, my thundering heart drowned most of it out. An officer loomed over me, his mouth forming words that failed to reach my ears. The paramedics seemed to retort, much to his chagrin. I cast my gaze upon the modern structure ahead, an incandescent glow piercing the night. Panels of glass stared back like watchful eyes, knowing the truth of what lay within. The smooth chime of a bell reverberated through the room, joined by the squeak of feet on yoga mats. My eyelids fluttered open, just in time to see the instructor place a hand gently over her heart and give a slight bow. A lithe figure next to me uncurled like a cat, stretching to life, feline and graceful in her movements. Her name-brand attire hugged her toned curves, the same curves that I'd seen in an Instagram post this morning. Retreat Day 1. Learning to love my body. The caption was a paragraph thinly veiled as self-love and content, but the undertones bled through. Despite, rather, instead. I learned I don't need it was smoke and mirrors, the edited photos, smiling to promote green juices, the constant upgrade of wardrobes and skincare products and makeup. Behind the facade was a girl grasping at the straws of relevancy and follower counts. And judging by the way she cut her eyes at the woman in the front row of the studio now, the straws were becoming further out of reach. Allison Divino. I recalled her name then, as she continued to glare at the woman. Long auburn locks whipped in my direction as Allison spun on her heel to leave. The woman under the fire of Allison's burning gaze appeared none the wiser. She smiled as she departed, holding an air of confidence that only a ruthless businesswoman could. Genevieve Sterling, financial investment heiress and CEO. It's no wonder Allison was green with envy. After all, I imagined the salary of an influencer paled in comparison. And how nice would it be to start life with a silver spoon? I made another mental note, trying to piece together the puzzle of faces I'd encountered last night at the welcome dinner, albeit a somewhat difficult task at a silent retreat. As I made my way to the doorway, a burly shoulder jostled against my own. Glancing to the side, I was met with the red-faced glare of Victor Russo, the lawyer who constantly seemed on the verge of a tantrum. For him, this event seemed more like mandatory anger management than a relaxing weekend of introspection. Victor grumbled something, shoving his way past me and out of the boiling studio. Hot yoga was never something I'd been eager to try, and the sweat pricking my skin reminded me of that. I yearned for a shower. I padded my way down the hall to my assigned room. Stretches of glass greeted me, late afternoon sunshine glistening upon the elaborate furnishings. As I turned on the shower, steam curling into the air and coating the mirror, I observed my reflection. Brunette hair, stringy with sweat, obsidian eyes gazing back, muscles aching. I peeled off my tank top. In doing so, a prickling sensation tingled beneath the skin of one of my shoulder blades. I strained my neck to inspect it in the mirror. A patch of redness had started to form, itching with each movement, skin flexing. Running a few fingers over the spot, I hissed, the sting palpable. Perhaps it was from one of the yoga positions, rubbing against the mat as I tried, unsuccessfully, to keep up. Stepping into the steam, I relished the warm caress. Since dinner wasn't for another hour, I took my time washing, scrubbing, and generally enjoying the sound of silence. I could tell most of the others were already struggling to cope with the drastic dissolution of most noise. All of them extroverts in their daily lives. This was a challenge for them. My thoughts wandered as I went about primping myself for dinner. After curling my hair, applying makeup, strapping on my heels, and sliding a pendant around my neck, I shimmied into my dress. A vibrant red. The satin of it clung in all the right places. A flat note that gradually increased in volume hummed from the digital panel by the door. Dinner time. The savory aroma of roasting meat wafted through the dining hall. My mouth watered. The chefs here were world class. The welcome dinner the night prior exemplified that as I had torn into a leg of lamb and wolfed down perfectly steamed asparagus, so I knew tonight would be no different. Our selected meals were hand-delivered to each of us, half the group abstaining from meat. As I sliced into the steak before me, crimson juices pooling, my skin prickled with the sensation of being watched. I glanced up, a pair of blue eyes catching mine. His chiseled features were intense, and he didn't avert his gaze as he took a bite of his meal. The twitch of a slight smile pulled at the corners of his mouth as he continued to stare. Jackson Rothmeyer, corporate real estate mogul. I'd seen his icy gaze before, plastered across the media. He even had his own Wikipedia page. Quite the accomplishment for someone in real estate. But the way his eyes traveled ever lower made my skin crawl. He was married, after all, his wife having attended many of his philanthropic appearances. The stare down seemed to last forever, finally interrupted by the crash of glass. Everyone turned. In the far corner of the room, A bulbous man in a designer suit waved a waiter away as he attempted to collect the shattered remnants of a whiskey glass. He adjusted his tie with fumbling fingers, and if this hadn't been a silent retreat, he probably would have slurred his words. Howard Gunnison, former politician and drunkard, the man was notoriously scummy. So when I saw his face last night, I almost laughed out loud at the notion of such a human trying to better themselves. And, quite obviously, the mission was not going well. He had to have snuck a flask in to get that tanked between yoga and dinner. At the table across from Howard, a posh woman in a pantsuit curled her lip in disgust at the scene. Melissa Ellsworth, entrepreneur and public speaker. Melissa had graced many stages in her career, discussing the ins and outs of successful entrepreneurship. The details of her rags to riches story pulled on the heartstrings of the nation, inspiring the layman to believe that perhaps they too could start their own clothing brand from the ground up. Forks scraping plates pierced the quiet, with the occasional mumble from Howard as he beckoned for a new glass of whiskey. Melissa rolled her eyes over her wine glass as she took a prolonged sip. Our fearless leader and head of the retreat entered the room then. Michael Solomon, his long hair was tied back into a ponytail, linen clothing hanging from his thin frame. Head held high, he appraised the value of his guests, and judging from the slight sneer, I gathered that value was rather low. Conceit dwelled within him. I could sense it from a mile away. Without a word, Michael raised his hands in a gesture of thanks. The guests nodded in silence as he departed. We had seen very little of Michael since our arrival, and truthfully, he was a bit of a recluse. Perhaps that's why he enjoyed running a silent retreat. I tossed my napkin on my plate, excusing myself from dinner. With a bit of disdain, I passed by Howard, feeling his eyes on me as I brushed a bit too close to his table. I couldn't stand another second of being ogled or watching a rich drunkard make an utter fool of himself. Just after slipping off my heels, a light knock rapped against the door. Without the advantage of a peephole, I was forced to open it without screening my visitor. Jackson leaned in the doorway, hair slightly tousled. "I know we're not supposed to talk," he whispered, "but I saw the way you were looking at me at dinner." I cocked an eyebrow inquisitively, mostly at his audacity. "Don't play coy," he continued. "I know what you want, and I understand." He understands because I want it too. His hands were suddenly on me, groping, his breath hot on my neck. My skin screamed in disgust beneath his touch, and pain ignited as his hand brushed over the spot on my shoulder blade. I hissed, which he interpreted as a green light, pushing himself on me further. "I knew you wanted..." The words breathlessly tumbling from his lips were cut short, and he glanced down, Wincing, a shining blade protruded from his chest. A stain, like spilled wine, spreading across the virgin white of his shirt. Blood replaced words, and he sputtered in his collapse. I took a step back, watching him crumple against the wood, smearing its polished surface. He shuddered briefly before stilling. Jackson Rothmeyer, adulterer, was no more. This wasn't his first offense either. He was a serial offender when it came to infidelity. Oh my God! A horrified voice came from the hall. Allison, frozen in place, trembled. The front of my dress was stained, blood plastered across my arms. Undoubtedly, a horrifying sight. I watched as she fumbled to find her phone. The phone that I had earlier swiped from her table on my way out of dinner while she was busy glaring at Genevieve. If anyone was a liability to call for police, it was the influencer practically glued to her phone, and I needed more time. Please, she begged, stumbling back. I had originally planned this differently, but she just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. My muscles screamed as I lunged for her. She squealed like a frantic pig. Scarlet footprints trailed me as I chased Allison into the dining hall. Again, she screamed, this time as she noticed Howard slumped over his unfinished plate, eyes blank and glassy. That one had been rather easy. A quick drop of a pill into his whiskey on my way out of the dining hall, and a long enough onset for the crowd to clear out before he succumbed. A silent tick off the checklist. There was no need for Allison to cry over Howard. Not only was he a scumbag, but his drunkenness had taken the life of another. A few years prior, blitzed from a night at the bar, Howard had struck and killed a teenage girl who had snuck out of her house. Thanks to Howard's power and some unfortunately good connections, he faced the lowest possible sentence. Allison's wailing brought me back to the moment. She cowered in a corner, eyes darting wildly in search of an escape. Though she was the lowest offender on my list, I still couldn't let her go. It was a formality. I plucked a knife from a nearby table and flung it forward with a dizzying speed. The crying stopped, and Allison slumped against the wall, the handle of the blade jutting from her eye socket. Footsteps echoed from down the hall, and I turned just in time to see Victor gawking and tripping into the room before wheeling backward. What the? His face blanched, a stark contrast to the usual beet red. He clutched his chest and staggered back. Help, he croaked. This one would finish itself, I supposed. Victor collapsed. I stepped carefully over to him. For a few moments, he clawed at my claves, pulled at the hem of my dress, sputtered, then silence. No longer would Victor's temper detonate at the expense of others, namely his battered wife. No longer would the law protect him from the wreckage of his short fuse. I paused for a moment, surveying the mess. Things had been set in motion now, and there was no going back. An hour later, I found myself sitting alone in the foyer. Luckily, I had managed to avoid any more blood. In one room, Melissa hung from the ceiling fan by a twisted, overpriced dress one of her company's very own. But I was certain the children who fabricated it in her sweatshops, one of whom perished due to poor labor conditions, wouldn't be too sad. Melissa had never lifted a finger to go the extra mile in life. And now she didn't even lift a finger in her own death. In another room, Genevieve lay still, adjacent to a gun that had likely cooled off by now. She snuck it in for protection, a paranoia developing since her defrauding tendencies were exposed to the public tendencies that cost so many others their livelihoods, while she raked in the profits. It was ironic. Her career had been upheaved by a smoking gun, and now she was leaving this world by a smoking gun. I tallied 6 bloody fingers sitting cross-legged under a lone chandelier. Only one more to complete the requirements. I caught him earlier, cowering in a storage closet with a cell phone, but knew I had to save him for last. With the retreat being so isolated, I knew I had some time to wrap things up. I gathered my remaining strength, peeling myself from the floor. "Michael!" I called lackadaisically. My voice ricocheted in the barren foyer. I never did grasp the appeal of the minimalist aesthetic, the coldness and emptiness of it. Like a fox in winter, I stalked through the white-walled expanse, listening intently for my prey. A muffled sob came from the storage closet. The idiot hadn't even bothered to move. I knocked politely, opening the door to reveal the coward huddled in the far corner. "Stay back," he shouted, wielding a mop handle in defense. "I'm warning you." Michael, you just don't get it, do you?" My tone was condescending. There was some enjoyment in watching this pompous man wither. "You made a deal, and this is part of the deal. What the hell are you talking about?" I clucked my tongue, chuckled. "Hell? That's funny. You see, Michael, I know for as spiritual as you are, you can't make the world butterflies and rainbows through manifestation alone. No amount of writing out your dreams in a vegan leather journal will make them come true." "How did you know about my journal?" he asked, eyes narrowed. "Michael, I know everything. Everything about everyone. Truths you couldn't fathom. You called on a higher, or perhaps I should say, lower power for help. And here I am to seal the deal. Consider me a bounty hunter of sorts." I scratched my itching back as I tried to dumb it down for him. "Michael Solomon, you made a deal with the devil to get your dream life at any expense necessary. So that means murdering my guests and livelihood?" he cried. "In this case, yes. It's no simple feat to take that much energy from the universe to spend on one selfish person. Souls are required. Souls of 7 people 7 deadly sins. I don't understand. I sighed, exasperated, and proceeded to check off the requirements. Jackson Lust, Allison Envy, Howard Gluttony, Victor Wrath, Melissa Sloth, Genevieve Greed. I counted, putting a finger down with each name until only one remained. That leaves Pride. I could tell he still wasn't following. I know how high you hold yourself, Michael, looking down your nose at others. And the fact that you were willing to sacrifice anything for your benefit says it all. The gears clicked into place in Michael's mind, and he started to sob. Please, I'll do anything. We've already gone that route, Michael. Besides, you had your dream life, a successful business in solitude, where you could control the lives of others exactly how you wanted. It just happened to have an expiration date. I snatched the mop, snapping it in half over my knee. The unevenness of splintered wood made as good a weapon as any at the moment. Michael trembled, closed his eyes. Don't worry, it's all about to be over. With unswift jab, I checked off the final requirement. I tossed the other half of the mop handle aside with a clatter. The sting in my shoulder blades blossomed into a full-blown ache, and I rolled them to quell the pain. Not long now, slowly, I wound my way back to the foyer, sucking in breath after breath, quicker and quicker, until I was practically hyperventilating. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer before screaming into the drive. I held my breath and willed the tears to come until they streaked down my ruddy cheeks. Police, come out with your hands up. I obeyed, whimpering in my exit. Please, help me, I screeched. He tried to kill me. I had to do it. He killed them all. I collapsed to my knees in the moonlight, feeling a heat begin to burn as the gravel bit into them. Once they cleared me, the paramedics quickly became preoccupied with searching for signs of life inside the blood-soaked retreat. The cops questioned me, but I feigned catatonia. It didn't matter anyway. I could feel the pull towards home, my skin smoldering beneath the emergency blanket. For a brief moment, no one watched me. I shrugged off the blanket, once again rolling my shoulders. The ache crescendoed, skin tightening. I winced, and one by one, feathers burst forth in 2 black plumages, wings of the fallen. The mission was complete, and the heat emanating from the earth beckoned me. It's time, a familiar voice hissed. The heat intensified, another 7 souls feeding the flames. Newton's cradle. Something was wrong, fatally wrong. He couldn't grasp the reason for his anxiousness. As Clive stepped onto the platform at precisely 06:05 and 35 seconds, waiting for his early morning commuter train. Something was wrong, he thought. Something was not right. In those moments in his life, his mind concentrated on an image of Newton's cradle. It was idle, motionless. The big brass orbs dangling from the brass cradle. All were stationary, passive and still. But there was a sense of anticipation. The orbs were oscillating in anticipation of movement. One of the outside orbs to the left or right would start the motion, and then the orb would send all the others into a monotonous, endless click, clacking. When will one of them initiate the law of the conservation of energy, the transfer of energy, the two-way domino effect? Clive knew. He grinned with the image of Newton's cradle in the front of his mind. He could count time, the seconds, by the rhythmic striking of each brass orb in Newton's cradle. The kiss of the cold metal against cold metal. Click. Clack. Energy converted into time. That's what made Clive special. Clive knew how to slow down time, to make it stop. "Don't you mess up now. Stay cool, stay calm," said the voice in his head. It was his imaginary friend, he had been told. Clive knew different. Mr. Black stepped onto the platform at 06:06 and 10 seconds. In his commuter uniform, his pressed suit was covered with an elegant cashmere and wool full-length overcoat and camel-colored scarf elegantly arranged on both sides of the coat, covering the lapels. His umbrella hung on his angled arm, held in position like a soldier on parade. "Morning, Clive," greeted Mr. Black. "Not so cold this morning." Then the hushed whisper as he passed by Clive to take up his normal position on the platform. "What time will she come?" "Don't say anything." "Nothing, you idiot," the voice said gruffly in his head. Mr. Gray bundled onto the platform at 06:07 and 5 seconds, as ever fumbling nervously with his numerous pockets, more than likely trying to check on the whereabouts of his wallet, keys, making sure he hadn't forgotten anything. For the day's commute, he opened and checked his slim briefcase to locate his phone and book for the umpteenth time. "Morning, Clive," Mr. Gray said to Clive. "Bit chilly today?" Then the whisper from behind his raised hand, hiding his mouth, his lips. "What time will she come? You say a word, your life won't be worth living." The voice inside his head hissed. Mr. Brown arrived slightly late at 06:08 and 30 seconds. He continued to peer in concern at his watch, but brightened as he recognized Clive. "Morning, Clive," Mr. Brown said to Clive. "Fine morning." Then the whisper and furtive look for a fraction of a second before he said, "What time will she come?" The voice in his head made a cough, sounding like a grunt. It was a warning signal, not to reply. Mrs. Mauve and Mrs. Green stepped onto the platform together in deep conversation, talking behind animated hands. As they passed Clive, they both whispered, without turning their heads. "What time will she come?" they said in unison, and then walked to their waiting positions on the platform. "Don't!" warned the voice in Clive's head. Finally, Miss Pink arrived at 6:09 and 20 seconds. She strode confidently onto the platform like a catwalk model. She knew Everybody on the platform had waited for her entrance this morning. For all the waiting passengers, it was the thrill of the day she imagined. She walked with the same purpose as a model, a gladiator of hearts and minds. She imagined she was walking a straight line, walking directly, purposely towards Clive. And on cue, her timing was stage perfect. She winked flirtingly at Clive, the wink that meant, "Any time, I'm your license to promiscuity, buddy." A longing stare to the recipient of her wantonness. An unsaid message. "Take me." "Shut the up! You dare! You just dare!" said the angry, slightly nervous voice in his head as Miss Pink passed Clive. She whispered like everybody else, "What time will she come?" He followed her path, looking enviously at her long, shapely legs, her tight backside. Everybody was in their normal position. They all started looking downline for sight of the commuter train to the right. The tunnel entrance to the left was a dark, black hole, like a large muzzle of a gun. A void, an impenetrable blackness. It was different to the darkness of the early winter morning, where the light pollution and illuminated glare diffused the blackness and played tricks with eyes. Then the stranger arrived. He wore dark glasses and a long black trench coat styled raincoat. He looked around the platform and recognized Clive. He bowed his head and strode up to Clive. There was intent in his voice when he said, "Mr. Caldwell, I need a few words with you. Do you mind if we talk?" "Don't tell him anything. Understand? Not a word," screamed the voice. "It's an important matter, Mr. Caldwell. It's about your wife." The stranger in the long trench coat didn't finish the sentence. "Be careful now," said the voice with a menacing tone. Instantly, the golden orbs started to move in Newton's cradle. Click, clack, click, clack. The energy and counter-energy started to dance. Both the cradle and balls were shuddering, jerking in an erratic, crazed movement. "What time will she come?" said the stranger. He didn't whisper it like the others, but as the voiced question appeared in the hushed morning air, the stranger smiled a knowing smile. Clive thought he noticed a smirk. "Keep that mouth shut. Keep it shut." The voice in Clive's head was getting more than angry. It was becoming uncontrollable, insane. Click, clack, click, clack. The golden orbs had really started to move now. They were moving back and forth with the velocity of a funfair ride. Clive had forgotten the name of the ride. His brow started to sweat. His palms started to feel clammy. He felt nauseous. Bang! The explosion came from the black tunnel entrance. The impact, the latent energy of the explosion, was made more catastrophic as it was ignited from inside the tunnel. And then the trapped energy blasted outwards with more force at its mouth. The entrance, a titanic release of deadly energy. Huge pieces of masonry. Metal flew like missiles through the dark morning air, hissing with a deadly force. The sonic boom of the explosion deafened the dark morning skies. Clive had a slow-motion image of the chaotic debris decapitating some waiting passengers on the platform, their bodies smashed into pieces by the force of the explosion. Clive slowed the titanic forces in his mind to a still photograph type image. He made it stop, click, clack, click, clack. The sound of Newton's cradle returned from his peripheral hearing as the sound of the explosive forces stopped at the same instant as the horrific images. "She won't come now," said the voice with evil mirth in Clive's head. "She's gone forever." There was a sense of finality in the last words. "They will be ready for you shortly, Mr. Caldwell," the nurse said chirpily. Clive was handcuffed to the wheelchair. Two burly attendants on each side of the wheels. The door opened suddenly, and Clive was wheeled into the meeting room. There was a committee of 3 men and 2 ladies waiting inside, all seated behind desks, files, and papers, laptops in front of them, and on the side, seated ready to take minutes. A transcriber of the meeting was a young administration lady wearing a bright puce lady's suit. Sitting separately in the corner of the room was a strange man with dark glasses. The attendants and the chirpy nurse stood at the side and behind Clive, seated in the wheelchair. "How are you today, Mr. Caldwell?" said one of the women, a member of the committee. Before Clive could answer, the women started the introduction to the meeting. The psychiatric team of Edmundston Mental Hospital. In attendance today, Dr. Schwartz, Dr. Seri, Dr. Braun, Dr. Zellini, and myself, the chairperson, Dr. Malva, presiding over case 10476, Mr. Clive Caldwell. Dr. Malva paused. "Now, Mr. Caldwell, under the Mental Health Act of 2018, we are required to conduct a regular status review of your condition. The committee has your records, and we have duly reviewed all the details, including your recent status of the last 6 months, and we find some improvements in your condition. We have some questions for you today. Do you feel in a frame of mind to answer?" Clive paused for some moments before he answered calmly. "Yes, that's okay." "Okay. Looking at the records, we find that your medication is stabilizing your previous traumas. There are no reported incidents of violent behavior. Do you have visions? Or when was the last time you had any distressing visions, Mr. Caldwell?" "I can't remember. Not for some time," Clive quietly replied. "Good. And what about voices? Do you hear any voices in your head nowadays?" "No, ma'am. And I don't have any headaches either," Clive added. "Very good. We, the committee, believe that you no longer pose a security risk, not whilst you are in this institution. and you are taking your prescribed daily medication. We have also agreed that based on a clean incident-free record under the constant observation of this institution, that in 6 months we can look at a release program. What do you say about that, Mr. Caldwell? Great. Getting me time back again. Thank you, ma'am, Clive said with some hesitation. He looked to the corner of the room at the seated stranger. The seated stranger took off his dark glasses and peered directly at Clive. He had no eyes. Instead, where there should be eyes and eye sockets, there were 2 black holes. They looked like tunnel entrances, with the scars and scorch marks of fire caused by tremendous explosive blast were evident on and around the circumference of the black holes. The stranger's expression didn't change. His face was peering directly at Clive, and then he smirked and mouthed silently, "What time will she come? Who is that?" Clive thought. "The past and the future, you arsehole. Don't look at him, you idiot," said the voice in Clive's head. "Okay, nurse, take Mr. Caldwell away, and we will see the next patient." The attendants reversed the wheelchair out of the meeting room. Clive's first thought, 5 minutes and 12 seconds. Meetings are getting shorter. Clive was grinning, a crooked smile which never disappeared off his face. But no one noticed his eyes, peering at nothing. There seemed to be something going on behind the masked appearance on his face, his pasted-on smile, his eyes. It was a charade for the continued monitoring and inspection of all at Edmonston. He wore the mask like a reveler at Mardi Gras, his unique disguise. "Fake it to make it," the voice in Clive's head. "Told you we'd be out of here. Just keep smiling, Sonny. Just be patient with these arseholes for a little while longer. Who's always looked after you, Sonny Jim. Always. Right from the beginning of time." Click. Clack. The sound of the orbs in Newton's cradle continued counting time. Clive's time. An emerald deal. "This is unbelievable," Francis exclaimed as he held my self-portrait in his hands. "It looks just like you." Francis Frankie Cullens is my best friend, and he holds in his hands what I hoped to be the beginning of my illustrious career as an artist. I smile at him, a humble, gentle smile, as I contain the bubbling anxiety within the pit of my stomach. "Do you really think so?" I asked, in what I hoped to be a tone that indicated only mild curiosity, and not that of a child seeking validation. Frankie looked from the painting and up to me with blazed excitement in his eyes. "This is no joke, Mort. What I have in my hands here is pure, uncut talent." He lightly shook the painting in his hands as he said so, but abruptly stopped when he realized he was doing so, as if worrying he could ruin it. "As a matter of fact," Frankie continued, "I'd like to post this on your page and talk about the process of how you painted this, if you're all right with that." Honestly, I was taken aback by this offer. What? Like, you want to be my manager or something? I sarcastically asked him this as I chuckled, but Frankie's face remained sincere. His response to me felt so genuine, so lacking in the raillery I expected, that it took me some time to register it. Why not? I've always believed in your work, Mort, even when no one else did. But with this, he trailed off as he looked back down at my painting. Finally, he continued. This was seriously all freehand? I nodded. Yes, it really was. But, Frankie, would you really want to be my manager? I don't even know what that job would involve. He waved his hand dismissively at me and smirked. Exactly why you need one. Let me handle all the details. But this, you just need to worry about making more of this. His smirk had grown into a wide grin as his eyes welled with moisturized droplets. I was stupefied at my friend's eagerness to want to work for me after seeing this latest piece of my work. I knew, of course, that this painting and all others that followed would be different. But to have this sort of hypnotic effect was entirely unexpected. Yeah, okay, I hesitantly agreed. Go ahead and post it, then. Frankie's eyes widened in a somewhat disturbing display of ecstasy. Perfect. I'll get on that right now, and you do what you gotta do for your process, and you get another painting out. ASAP. I promise you, Mort, this is going to be huge. Before I could even open my mouth to respond, Frankie had already darted out of my studio, which was just my room in our shared apartment, and into his room across the hall as I heard his door slam behind him in an eager swing. I stood silently amidst the canvases on easels, which all displayed different degrees of blankness to what had the appearance of being worked on for several minutes of brush strokes. Then, forgotten, they stood around the room in a way that formed a labyrinth to the bed, one which only I knew the right way through. I looked at all of these unfinished and unbegun paintings and vowed they would not stay this way for long. Things were different now. I got most of the way through a new painting I was working on. I believe I will title Green Singers, when I noticed I was at it for almost 10 hours straight. No food, water, or bathroom breaks. I got myself into bed. I lay there for an unknowable amount of time as sleep eluded me, and I found myself thinking back to a conversation I'd had with an alluring stranger. It was last week, on a Thursday, when I was at my favorite art exhibition in town, which thankfully had a small coffee shop near the entrance. As I sipped at my caramel macchiato, I was scrolling through the reactions, or lack thereof, one of my paintings received. It had been posted for approximately 72 hours and had garnered 7 likes, while most of the comments were uninspired at best and rude at worst. One of them even said something along the lines of, "This is motel art at best. You look too scared to put any real expression into your work. Don't quit your day job for this. hope this helps." What the hell was that even supposed to mean? I dropped my phone on the table in such a frustrated way that my coffee trembled and nearly spilled. Not that I cared. I threw my hands over my face and exhaled in an admittedly overdramatic, defeated way. There I buried my face as I gathered myself when I heard someone sit down in the chair across from me. I looked up, expecting to see Frankie. Instead, it was a man who I had never seen before. I recall little from his physical appearance, but I remember he was wearing an expensive-looking suit, and his eyes, those piercing emerald green eyes, with an intense and age sheen, the likes of which I had never seen before. "Can I help you?" I asked, making sure the irritated tone, hinting at "please go away," was noticeable in my inflection. The stranger gave me a smile that was warm and comforting, and I felt my disappointment in myself and the world melt away from my chest. I know it's weird to say, but I instantly felt comfortable with this man here. "I'm a fan of your work," he said to me. His voice was velvety and sweet. "I wanted to meet you in person, but I have to say, there is room for improvement." Of course, I thought to myself, another critic who thinks they can tell me how to paint. "Oh yeah?" I said, with the irritation back in force. I took another sip from my coffee. "Oh, yes," the man said. "But that's not a bad thing. Every great artist knows there is always room for improvement. It's the knowledge that one would never achieve perfection, yet their pursuit for it is endless." I rolled my eyes at him, though I guessed he did have a point. "Maybe you're right. And I'm guessing you have the solution for that?" This was obviously a rhetorical question, yet the man kept his gaze locked in mine, and he said, "It so happens I do." What would you say if your paintings would become the epitome of perfection? That through your great works, your name would be immortalized, etched into the framework of history alongside Monet, Van Gogh, Michelangelo, and so many others. I laughed dryly at him. For that, I paused, peering searchingly into my cup of coffee, now at room temperature. For that, I would give everything. That statement came out of me so much more sincerely than I would have expected from myself. Realizing this, I laughed at myself, raised my coffee, and gulped the rest of it down. I was feeling this odd sense of anticipation I could not explain. Like the feeling a kid at a theme park gets when they are near the end of the line for a ride on one of the attractions. The man with the green eyes raised an eyebrow at me as he said, "While I admire the enthusiasm, I wouldn't ask you for everything. If I were to perfect your art, I would ask for very little in return. In fact, now it was my turn to raise my eyebrows, but in a more incredulous, disbelieving sort of way. Wait, Are you serious right now? The man said nothing. He only kept that cool, soothing smile. I pressed on. So, you could make me one of the greatest artists of all time, and you would want what? My soul? That's what this is, right? Some low-budget Twilight Zone episode where you grant me my biggest dream, and all I give in return is my soul? Now the man leaned forward in his chair, closer to me. I could smell him now. It was a scent that felt so refreshing as it ignited nostalgic feelings for events of my life that I could not recall ever happening. It soon dawned on me that the feelings of nostalgia his scent gave me were not like smelling freshly mowed grass and remembering a magical summer from childhood. This was a sense of longing for events in my life I had not yet lived. No, you don't have to worry about that, he said in a reserved timbre. Despite what certain media would tell you, I don't barter for souls. I considered this, then asked him, well, then what do you want from me? 2 things, he said. If I immortalize you and your art, I need you to paint something for me. I will tell you what at a time of my choosing. Second, I need you, Jack Mortimer, to say 5 little words to me to endorse our contract. I was practically vibrating in my seat now, with anticipation, as if a colony of butterflies had birthed within me all at once. He didn't need to tell me what those 5 words were that he needed, as I could feel them on the tip of my tongue, ready to burst. I stood up and eagerly reached my hand out to shake his. He did the same. I fervently told him what he needed to hear. I see you, Mr. Green. 3 months had passed since I painted that self-portrait, which I allowed Frankie to keep. He keeps it proudly hung in his new office, where he works around the clock to get me new exhibits for my paintings. Green Singers had been a phenomenal success, and there had been 12 others so far after. He even got me a spot to talk on the late night show, which, to be fair, didn't seem too hard, as they had reached out to him and practically begged for me to make an appearance. But what I found most astonishing from this whole experience was that the scenes I painted seemed to come to life not long after they were finished. When I painted my hometown with a clearly visible view of the Andromeda Galaxy in the night sky, the next evening, the miraculous anomaly was reported across the states, which led astronomers stumped as to how it had suddenly become so bright to make it so visible to the naked eye. I painted snow in Southern California, and the next day, there was a blanket of almost 12 inches in Los Angeles. That's what made it exceptionally convenient when, out of the millions of supporters and admirers across the globe, I discovered one truly bitter, ignorant critic. His name was Elijah Quill, better known by his Reddit username as ELQ69, a truly tasteless name to choose for one such as him. It didn't take long for me to find a picture of him, as people like him are always so self-absorbed that their photos are aplenty and public to pair with their highly opinionated views. But Eli should have thought to be more careful what he does with photos of himself on the internet. After I had memorized his face, his body type, and what style he wears, it was almost too easy to paint his liking as I saw fit. Elijah Quill, in my depiction, was seen in a dark alley somewhere, having been beaten to death. The folds inside his pocket turned out to indicate he had been robbed after the fact. I kept this painting to myself, of course, but couldn't resist the urge to Google the news in the city I found that he lived in. There he was, the egotistical bastard, making the top headline. Good for him. A few days after the oh-so-tragic passing of LQ69, Frankie came to see me. We no longer lived in that small apartment together, as I had found a nice condo in the city. I buzzed him in, and he came in with that adoring, eager grin. That suck-up smile was starting to get on my nerves. "Hey, Mort," he said cheerfully. My God, he's practically skipping towards me, I thought exasperatedly. "Listen, I got a new opening for you downtown, and if you're okay with it, I'm thinking somewhere around 5 we can..." I held a hand to stop him, which he did instantly. "Hang on a second, Frankie. There's something I got to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." He cocked his head to the side as he asked me, "Sure, what's up?" I looked him into those weirdly adoring eyes as he waited. "I'm going to have to let you go, Frankie." The look Frankie gave me was as if I had just kicked a puppy across the room. "Well, what?" he stammered. I blinked and said, "You're fired, Frankie. I'm sorry, but the truth is, I don't need you anymore. You can expect your last check in the mail." Frankie backed away, his legs trembling. His eyes darted about the room in disbelief. "I can't believe this. I thought we was friends, Mort." Tears had already begun to roll down his face. "We were, but let's face it, Frankie, I've outgrown you. I'm sure you understand." Frankie's face turned beet red as he exclaimed, "You can't do this. We were a team." I watched him begin to storm away and back to my front door as he yelled over his shoulder, "You'll regret this, Mort. It was both of us, together." The door slammed. "Well, that was dramatic," I said to no one. Ciao. That night, I awoke with a start. I was having some horrendous dreams, though I can't remember the details. Now awake, I found that I was standing in my new studio, painting. The unfinished work before me showed horrid images that were difficult for the human mind to comprehend. hulking beasts of otherworldly proportions as they crowded and swarmed an unnamed city. People stacked haphazardly on pyres as they burned in a green, hellish inferno. The more I looked into this accursed piece, the more I felt my sanity quickly escaping me. I thought I heard voices chanting around me in some long-forgotten tongue, whispering names I had not heard nor possessed the power to pronounce. Summoning every ounce of my mental fortitude and strength, I managed to tear my gaze from the canvas as I knocked it to the floor. That's when I saw behind it was another easel, and displayed on it was my painting of the murdered Elijah Quill, whose disproportionately crooked neck had upturned his face to look directly into my eyes. That one should not be there, I thought incredulously. It was hidden away. Come now, Mr. Mortimer. Such a beauty should never be kept hidden. That voice behind me. It was his voice. I spun around and saw the man, this Mr. Green, smiling at me. You, I said, as I pointed an accusing finger at him. You're what made me paint that nightmare, aren't you? Mr. Green looked at the unfinished painting on the floor, then back to me. That was our deal, Mort. One painting of my choosing, when I wish it. It would be in your best interest to uphold your end and finish it. No, I muttered. No, I will not bring that hell into being. The deal is off. You can take away this power. I've already gotten enough out of it anyway. Mr. Green sighed at me, but coolly said, I would have to agree. Thanks to your admirable work with Mr. Quill, I was taken aback by this. What do you mean by that? I demanded. Mr. Green's smile vanished. He sneered at me as he explained. I told you when we first met that I do not barter for souls. I don't have to, as your kind are always so eager to place it in the palm of my hand. For just the smallest taste of power and ultimate adoration, you burned yourself on the very pyre that you built. My jaw dropped open. No. But what could I say? What could I do? I go now, Mr. Green continued with a returning smile, now sinister as a dealer in a rigged game of poker, to prepare a place for you. And with those parting words, he faded from view, until all that was left were two floating orbs of emerald glaring at me, until they, too, were gone, alone again. In the darkness of my condo, I began to see visions, things that were not of my home, of a similar layout to the one I used to live in the apartment with Frankie. On a table, I saw a mostly empty bottle of Jack Daniels. I turned and saw on the edge of the bed was Frankie. He still lived in that tiny apartment, and here he was, drunk beyond all reason, with tears flooding his face and snot oozing from a sniffling nose. I saw in his hands he held that self-portrait, the first of my paintings after that deal. "Damn you, Mort," he whimpered. He produced a pocket lighter and set the flame to the bottom corner of my self-portrait. "No, Frankie, wait!" I screamed at him, but he didn't appear to hear me. The flames ate up the canvas as they crept from the torso to the painted face. "Damn you to hell, Mort," Frankie began to sob. The images of Frankie's room vanished, and my own dwellings had returned. "This is unbelievable," I cried as the last image of Frankie disappeared. Standing here in the dark of my own vanity, I felt the effects of Frankie's actions with that damned painting. The fire started at my feet and quickly licked and raced up my legs, soon engulfing my body. I yelled, swatting at the flames, yet the inferno continued to spread all around me, and only me as I raised my hands to my face and screamed. Not the brightest bulb. The light panned over the coast, gutting the night like a blade through a fish's belly. Emerson, Lee saw. From experience, he knew the storm would be raging well into the next day. But he'd be safe here. This lighthouse had weathered many storms before this one, and it would weather many more after, too. It had stood here since before he was born, and it would stand long after he was dead, which wouldn't be long now, he reasoned. He raised his metal cup to the windows, which looked out onto the frothing midnight ocean. He offered the night his cheers, then sipped his neat rum. Lightning lit up the abyss, burning his retinas white for one faltering heartbeat. The wind whipped and whooped around the edges of the lighthouse. The rumble of thunder came 3 seconds later, reverberating through his bones. Emerson blinked. The ocean was a cruel mistress sometimes. He knew that more than anybody. He'd spent much of his life aboard fishing vessels, at sea for months. He felt more at home on the open sea than on dry land. That was why he'd taken on the task of lighthouse keeper after retirement. But it seemed that people had lost their respect for the water. Kids rode inflatable beds out on riptides and needed rescuing. Rich yuppies took their boats out in unsafe conditions and needed rescuing. Partying youngsters went for midnight swims whilst inebriated. They drew the attention of the sea beasts, which they then hunted for revenge. And thus, the creatures needed rescuing due to their dwindling numbers. Companies dumped their foul excretions into the blue, so the sea needed rescuing too. Emerson growled and scowled out. The thunder and lightning lashed from the heavens once again. The rain pelted sideways at the window, rattling against the glass. The gale screamed like a dying creature, wounded by a harpoon. Another sound chimed throughout the lighthouse, but this had nothing to do with thunder. He grunted. Somebody had rung the lighthouse's doorbell. Who on earth could that be? The lighthouse clung to a rocky piece of coast that jutted out into the ocean. It was far from any town or village, as Emerson liked it. The only company he usually had came in the form of passing boats and hungry seagulls. Emerson took another swig of rum and set his cup on the table. The wood bore the marks of 1,000,000 condensation rings from the rum mugs of history. He grumbled to himself and passed through the door to the spiral staircase. The doorbell rang again as he descended. With care, the final treacherous steps. He threw the door open to the howling wind. "Yar, I'm coming, I'm coming. Hold your seahorses." On the stoop, 2 kids huddled together, no older than 18. They clung to one another as the wind whipped at them, and the storm soaked them to their bones. "I'm sorry, sir," said the boy, raising his voice over the gale. "But our car broke down, and we're stranded. Can we please hold up with you until the storm has passed?" Emerson was not a people person, but he was also not a heartless monster either. He opened the door to the boy and the girl and guided them up the staircases. "Yar, come in, come in. You're wetter than water. I got some blankies upstairs. Come, let's get you and your lass dry. Me name's Emerson." The boy smiled and offered his hand despite the chill that shook him. "Thanks, man. You're the best, Harry. And this is Skyla." Emerson led them up the winding staircase to the lighthouse's upper room, lit by the beacon. He got some dry towels, stale and mutt-eaten, but dry, and put the kettle on for warm tea. "Arr, you must be pretty frightened. What with you stranded in the dark and the rain, while the sea beats her chest like King Kong. She can be mighty fierce." The boy pulled a face and shook his head. He wrapped a towel around Skyla's shoulders before he tended to himself. "No, inconvenienced and uncomfortable, but not scared." Emerson frowned, but bit his tongue. He guided the youngsters to his couch. It wouldn't be the first time it got wet, and handed them mugs of steeping tea. He sighed and sat down opposite them on his old rickety chair. "And what, if you don't mind me asking, were you two doing out here this late at night?" The boy and the girl blushed. Harry started to say something, but then Skyla interrupted. She shoved her left hand into Emerson's face. A diamond glinted on her ring finger. "Harry proposed to me tonight," as the sun set over the water, staining it red, the color of love. Isn't that romantic? To Emerson, red was the color of blood once you'd chummed the waters to lure in the big fish. But he didn't say this. Yar, it do warm this old sea dog's heart to see young love in bloom. Why, my Batilda and I, we shared quite a torrid love affair, we did. But she's been sleeping with the fishes for longer than you've been alive. I still carry her picture in this old locket here, which I wear around me neck at all times. Here, take a look at this beauty, lad, but don't lose your eye for the young lass now, I. The boy blinked at the picture in the sea air-rusted locket. He did a double take. He seemed to struggle for words. His eyebrows knotted together like a bowline. Sir, that's a manatee, Emerson recoiled. You youngsters and your unrealistic Hollywood beauty standards. You shouldn't perpetuate such unhealthy attitudes towards appearances. It only fosters anxiety and insecurity. Yar, you might be young and lovely now, but see how pretty you'll look in 60 years. Let's see how you are once the sea's done rusted your lungs and your legs been took by an orca and a great white workin' in cahoots. The girl reached over and rapped a knuckle on his shin. A smirk touched the corners of her lips. But sir, both your legs are still attached, Emerson yelped and tucked his legs back under his chair. I jumped into the blood-stained brine. I did. Wrestled me legs back from the bellies of the respective beasts at the same time. Fought them both off, using nothing but me bare hands. I sewed them back on, I did, using nothing but a bit of old gut fishing line. I cleaned the wounds by spitting on them, then patched myself back up. It hurt for a while, but it didn't affect me well-trained balance on the deck. Yar, at sea you needs good sea legs, especially whilst Poseidon's throwing you about like a dusty old rug that your mama's trying to clean. The kids exchanged a glance and snickered. That didn't happen, did it, sir? Asked the boy. You're having us on. Emerson bit his lip. He knew how to get through to these young'uns, to teach them the proper respect they ought to have for the ocean. Emerson had seen waves taller than buildings and fish bigger than elephants. He'd seen currents sweep sailors to their doom in seconds. Emerson had seen men sink into the abyss as waves pummeled them like a boxer in a match with no referee to ring the bell. These kids had been on dry land, but the ocean was hungry. She could reach out and snatch you from the shore if she wanted. They had gotten lucky. The midnight tide hadn't pulled them out to sea, whilst the boy popped the question. Emerson got to his feet and slipped out the door to the spiral staircase. I have something to show you. You wait right here, my lovelies. Confused whispers came from behind him. Outside, the storm continued to rage. The wind screamed and the rain lashed. The ocean roared and threw itself against the lighthouse's base. The foundations shuddered. Emerson found the switch, covered in warning stickers, and flicked it. The lighthouse went dark. A small shriek came from above. He ascended in shadow, grinning at the panicked voices. He barged through the door and clicked the torch on. He illuminated his haggard face from below and bellowed. It was a dark and stormy night. Harry and Skyla screamed and clung to each other, their faces pulled in a rictus of terror in the torch's beam. "What the hell?" began the boy, but Emerson cut him off. The ocean was raging. The night was black. You couldn't tell where the sky ended and the water began. And we all knew that she, the creature, was out there hunting us. The hunters had become the hunted. A foghorn shattered the tension, deafening them all. Harry jumped up, knocking his chair over backwards. Skyla shrieked and threw her hands up to her face. A flick of a fish's tail later, the lighthouse shook around them. A great, wrenching metallic crunch rocked the world. Ice froze his limbs. He broke through the paralysis and staggered to the window. He shined his flashlight onto the rocks below. "Good God," whispered Emerson. The jagged stones had acted like a shark's teeth, puncturing the ship's hull. It leaned like a drunken sailor, 45 degrees to the side. On top, seamen clung to the rails, whilst others tried to scramble about the rain-wet deck. Baffled shouts punctured the storm's wailing. Boxes of cargo crashed into the surf. Some sailors tossed life rings into the brine to rescue men overboard. Emerson whimpered. This lighthouse had not had a single accident for almost 100 years. And now, in one swift hour, he'd caused a disaster. He should never have exaggerated the truth to impress these kids. The ocean was scary and beautiful enough as it was. It didn't need cheapening with manufactured myths and legends, but he'd tried to scare them into respecting the fierce hand of nature. Tried and failed. They thought he was an old coot who'd messed up on the job, and they wouldn't exactly be wrong now, would they? He'd forgotten the very lesson he'd been trying to teach. His shoulders slumped. "Yar, I'm not the brightest bulb, methinks. Gloria." They liked to share these idyllic, quiet moments in front of the mirrored dressing table. George combing Georgina's hair. It was something soothing, calming, and therapeutic, a necessary and intimate ritual, an important part of their relationship, which they had been doing together since they couldn't remember, certainly since childhood. In complete silence, never a word spoken, Georgina in a catatonic state of mind, completely immobile, a trance-like state. George slowly, softly, gently glides the brush through her long tresses of hair. This quiet ritual went on for hours, quietly, blissful. They were inside a bubble of tranquility. Gloria watched on, grinning from ear to ear, lolling against the chair, propped up with cushions. Gloria had seen it all. Gloria was a gift, a valuable gift of subterfuge for George, a bribe from his parents to keep him quiet, keep his mouth shut, about the secret that must be kept in the family. No one, absolutely no one must know. You know that, George, don't you? His parents would explain to the innocent ears of George. This is Gloria. You can whisper in her ear if you ever want to talk to someone about it. Okay? Gloria became the listener, the therapist. And then she would pass on the secret information to Georgina. Georgina was the stronger of the two, made of rock. Nothing disturbed or frightened Georgina. That's why George doted on Georgina. He knew he was weak, and she was so strong. She possessed the strength for both of them. Gloria was so pleased to be added to the family and to be an integral part of it. The family was wealthy. The father, a world-renowned specialist surgeon from a wealthy legacy. He was privileged from birth, nannies, boarding school. His pathway in life was constructed and planned before he was born, from generations prior and generations to come. The tried and trusted way. His marriage was arranged, with only a select few who could be considered a match in their world. In those high circles of society, she was perfect, of similar family status. She didn't lose any of her privileges. It was a perfect transition from her maternal family into her family of marriage. She didn't lose any sleep over the matter. Life continued on as normal. Gatherings, parties, friends. It was seamless. When she became pregnant shortly after the marriage, it made the headlines on the celebrity pages. The joyous ink leapt off the gossip pages. She demanded to be fully anesthetized for the birth. Pain was not a word in her personal experience. Dictionary. She was completely unaware of the conception, totally out of it. She could have given birth to a horse, and was equally unaware she had delivered twins. Gloria was selected as a gift, a treasure for George. She was token of unspeakable secrets, unfulfilled desires. Her appearance with her blonde, braided pigtails, gaudy red lips might have been misconstrued. But George hugged her lovingly from the very first time they met. His parents were incapable of showing affection, demonstrating their love with hugs and kisses, not in the normal sense. It was not accepted in their constrained, unemotional legacy, their upbringing, and it continued in this generational circle of supposedly refined upper-class family and friends. When Gloria arrived, George understood what he was missing. A feeling of unknown nostalgia for simpler circumstances, which he didn't have an inkling about or any comprehension that it existed. Another life, a different life, a life uncomplicated, without the subtle stresses or pressure continuously made by his parents. George always felt vulnerable, awkward, a feeling of an unfinished project in the presence of his parents. On the rare occasions he was allowed into company of his parents' friends, such as cocktail party events or saying farewell at nighttime, George was nervous, uncomfortable. Shyness overcame his speech as he stood dumb and gormlessly in front of the onlooking adults, inspecting George like an alien life form. "Strange boy," they would whisper as he turned his back on leaving the room. George heard the whispers. These overheard comments, like so many others, send him further into his interior cave of solitude and despair. At least George had Gloria to confide in, he always thought, and the thought consoled him. In the eyes of his parents, Gloria's arrival filled a gap. Gloria symbolized a desire for perfection and control over George, which was completely immoral. The family secret must be suppressed at all costs. George was getting older and wiser. Gloria was introduced with the sole intent of keeping the family secret secure. Everybody was aware that George was the weak link in the subterfuge, the conspiracy, the dark secrets of the family. Gloria was the guardian. She was central to it all, and that made her the gatekeeper to the whole incestuous situation. She was the overseer and protector. The only person Gloria confided in was Georgina. Gloria's secret was safe with Georgina. Doing a good job, is he? That's about all he is good for, combing your hair, Gloria said sardonically, without moving her lips like a ventriloquist dummy. George is a sweetie, stupid as an ass, but he is my loving brother, and I will always protect him, even from your foul mouth. Georgina replied defensively. He's so stupid. He can't hear us, or he ignores every word. The truth. He's a lame brain. Gloria continued her verbal attack. You are the smart one, the strong one in this family. Georgina, if it wasn't for you, we would still be in the clutches of those dinosaur parents, the molesting evil creeps. Gloria continued. Don't say a bad word about Mummy and Daddy like that. Shut that vile mouth of yours, Gloria. Georgina was getting agitated now, but George continued the slow grooming strokes, undeterred, and it seemed oblivious to the conversation between Georgina and Gloria. The smooth grooming strokes of brush helped Georgina to keep her temper, remain calm. I won't tell anybody what you did. Don't worry. Those abusers of innocent children deserved it. Justice was served. Only you. Georgina had the balls to do it. George doesn't have what it takes. Never did. He always hid behind you, scared of his own shadow. the stupid one." Gloria continued in her negative tone. "I watched on for years as they took you to their bed for their evil desires. For years, Daddy wanted control, his evil desires, his manipulation, his family fun. And she, Mummy, followed, a willing assistant, always pickled in her normal, alcohol-fueled state of mind, anesthetized. She was a lush most of the time. Both were heartless, immoral bastards. I was used like a comfort blanket, a rag doll, to make it seem normal. Those twisted monsters whisper in Gloria's ear. Gloria will keep the secrets of the night. Gloria will make any pain go away. Tell Gloria, but don't tell anybody else." Gloria mimicked the parents' words to their sexually molested victim. They deserved what was coming. George dropped the hairbrush and went to Gloria and started hugging her, whispering in her ear. "What did he say?" asked Georgina. "He says he loves me. And will I forgive him? Will I forgive him for his weaknesses?" Gloria replied, "Always the same. He's that stupid. He thinks it's his fault." Gloria was angry. "Don't be too hard on him. We need him to be his normal, complicit self. We need his continued silence. We need him to keep his mouth shut now, more than at any time. These are dangerous times. No slip-ups. We all need to stick together. Otherwise, there will be trouble for us all, including you, Gloria. Understand?" Georgina continued to look into the mirror, but her steely eyes and tightly drawn mouth emphasized the words. It was a threat. "Don't you trust me, Georgina, to keep your dirty, obscene family secrets locked away in my head?" Gloria said in a challenging, teasing manner. She was goading Georgina. Georgina lifted her right hand. Both hands had been hidden from sight, low between her parted legs during the long grooming process. As she lifted the concealed right hand, one could now see she was holding the blade of the 9-inch carving knife, splashed in crimson blood. The blood stood out a dark, dull shade of red against the shiny silver blade of the knife. Slowly, she raised the blade higher and then held it above her head. She held the pose and slowly turned her upper body and head to face Gloria. Unless you are looking for the same Gloria, I would recommend you keep your mouth shut, as you always have. It was the reason you were ingratiated into this family. Your loyalty has kept you alive and your dirty mouth tolerated. Your circumstances can change fatally if you start to change, my dear Gloria. Georgina glared at Gloria threateningly. Now let's clean up the mess. They say no bodies, no crime. Dark paranoia. In a small studio apartment on the 4th floor, a cynical young man scratches indifferently at an early birthday present. The man's name is Aaron Newman, a man whom life treats without deference, honor, or success. Waiters bring him cold burgers, and gas station clerks shut doors in his face. On this day before his birthday, he is given a lottery scratch-off that will change not only the way he views the world, but everyone in it. Aaron scratched away at the lottery ticket, scoffing as he did so at the cheapness of such a thoughtless gift. But as the second box read 500,000 same as the first, he felt his pulse double and thrum with the intensity of an orchestra of bass. He told himself not to get his hopes up, as the disappointment would only sour after that last scratch. But he couldn't help himself. His palms and forehead began to sweat, and he was acutely aware of his eyes beginning to blur. When the third $500,000 revealed itself, Aaron flew from his seat only for his legs to tremble, forcing him back down to the chair. His face expanded into the appearance of a scream, yet no sound escaped him as his throat tightened. He blinked several times and rubbed his eyes as to confirm to himself that this was not an illusion. And the numbers on the small slip remained the same. Aaron had won the jackpot, and it was all thanks to this apathetic, lazy idea of a birthday present. He decided he wasn't going to cash it right away. He didn't want to give the gifter the satisfaction of knowing they had given him such an exuberant gift. Aaron knew that they would claim credit as if they somehow knew they were giving him a winning ticket, and would expect Aaron to share his money. No, that simply wouldn't do. He'd have to play it cool and act casual with his life as if nothing happened. If the friend would ask about the ticket, he would say he won 20, which didn't feel like much of a lie to Aaron. Anyway, there was 500,000 after all. Aaron gave himself some time in his lonely apartment to collect himself and recenter his nerves. After several moments of balancing his breath and matting away the nervous sweats, he put on his shoes and left to go to the grocery store to have a personal celebration of his newfound, unsuspected success. Once in his car, Aaron drove down Main Street on his way to his town's small grocery store, the Piggly Wiggly, affectionately known as the Pig to locals. Realizing he's still jittery from his winnings, he sets his car on cruise control to keep a consistent, casual speed down the street. As he cruises, a black sedan rolls past a stop sign on his right and pulls in front of him, forcing Aaron to slam on his brakes. The car behind Aaron blares their horn angrily at them and swerves past him, continuing down the road as if this was all Aaron's fault. Aaron slams his fist on the horn as he glares at the black sedan. He can just make out a silhouette on the driver's side window. The shaded head appeared to be staring at him, though for what reason, Aaron could not say. "What the hell?" Aaron yells out at the dark car which is idled halfway between two streets. Finally, it completed its turn and moderately accelerated down Main. Aaron muttered angrily under his breath as he moved on, eventually turning into the small parking lot of the Pig. The unfortunately meager lot was packed full of vehicles as Aaron weaved up and down the lanes. At last, he found an open space, and as he turned the wheel to park, a faded blue truck rushed in, nearly scraping Aaron's front bumper as it did so. Aaron laid his palm against the horn, blaring his siren. Heads of pedestrians walking amongst the cars swiveled to glower at him, and the driver of the blue truck scowled at him as they raised their middle finger. Aaron's lower lip trembled, and his eyebrow twitched. He eventually gave up and parked along the curb at the front of the store. He saw others do it all the time, and figured just this once he would too. What's the worst that can happen? Now in the store, Aaron goes to the refrigerated meat section. He knows on most days he wouldn't even dream of buying himself a steak, as he could barely live on the salary he made. But the money he had set aside for rent was chump change compared to what's going to be hitting his bank later. Now was the time to splurge. He picks up a decently sized New York strip, then moves towards the beer. As he moved down the aisles among the other shoppers, Aaron noticed that several of them seemed to be looking at him with disdain out of the corner of their eyes. He saw a mother place her hand on the shoulders of her kid, quickly turning them away. Aaron wondered if he had something on his face, and offhandedly rubbed at his cheeks. Once in the alcohol section, Aaron inspected the beer selection. At first, he wondered if such an occasion would call for wine, but he didn't really care for the stuff. He settled on a 12 case of Blue Moon. He didn't know if he was going to drink all of them in one night, but wouldn't fault himself if he did. At the checkout, the cashier was loudly and sloppily chewing her gum. She never looked Aaron in the eyes, though did come close when she looked at his nose when she told him his total charge. Aaron couldn't say for sure why, but he felt like this cashier was harshly judging him in her mind. Let her judge. Aaron knew better. Aaron made it back to his apartment with little complication. The steak was overcooked, but the beers, all 12 of them, hit the spot nicely. He had music blasting as he danced awkwardly alone in the studio. With a break in the music, Aaron thought he heard something bang. He paused the music and stood, swaying, as he listened intently for sound. Bang! It was the window. Aaron rushed to the window, threw open the curtains, and looked outside to see two kids running across the parking lot in the dark, away from him. "You dipshits!" Aaron yelled. "Come try that again and see what happens." He moved to slam the window shut, and after blinking several times, he realized he never opened it in the first place. Now, with the mood killed, he slumped down on his couch with an aggravated sigh as he sat in desolate silence. Now he thought he could hear whispering, which sounded like they were being spoken just out of view of the corner of his eye. His head swiveled from side to side, yet he saw no one. Though no one could be seen, the whispers and hushed voices continued. They were malevolent, invasive, and bitter. He heard them snicker, as if they were sharing secrets that he wasn't allowed in on. He paced around his apartment room, looking under the couch and behind furniture, even going so far as to lift the pillows on his couch, but could not find the whisperers. An unsettling feeling rose in Aaron's stomach, and he knew it wasn't just the beer. He was reminded of all the rude, hateful people from earlier today. The people who, if they weren't casting malignant glowers, seemed as if they wanted to get him hurt or killed. That's when it hit him. They know. He doesn't know who they are or how they found out, but they know about his uncashed lottery ticket, and they're out to get his money. Fervently, he spun around, brushing off the aggressive quake to his head as he did so, and charged at the small coffee table in front of the couch where he left the scratch-off. He swiped it up and held it, clutched it against his chest. His pallid, sweaty face peered over his shoulder. The whispers were growing louder. No, closer, as he shielded his treasure. He slowly backed away from the table until he broke into a sprint across the room and into the closet. He slammed the door and collapsed on the floor. There he sat for the rest of the night, until after an unknowable amount of time had passed, and he finally fell asleep. The next day, his birthday, Aaron's head felt like it was being pounded in with a hammer, wrapped up by thin lemon slices. He stood up from his corner in the closet with an aching back and walked into the main room of his apartment. He looked at his phone and had somehow slept until almost noon and felt grateful he didn't have to go to work that day. He moved to the kitchen, and with trembling hands, he poured himself a glass of water and gulped it down. He refilled and did this 2 more times before shoving his face in his hands. He usually doesn't remember nights of heavy drinking, but he can recall last night clear as a bell. He knows that people are out to hurt him, possibly even kill him, to get their hands on his money. So he decides he is going to cash in this ticket ASAP and secure his money in the bank. Still wearing yesterday's clothes, he hastily puts on his crumbling sneakers, allowing himself to reverie on the classy new shoes he'll replace these with. He shoved the ticket in his pocket and rushed out the door towards the stairs, neglecting to even lock his door on the way out. Driving down his street, he noticed 2 girls standing on the sidewalk, and he noticed them cover their mouths and laugh. And he swears he saw their eyes dart over at his old car. He scowled at them as he drove past. Further down the road, there was a fallen tree that blocked most of his lane. He didn't see anyone from the other direction, but in light of everything, he had started to get nervous. With sweaty palms, he turns the wheel to move around the fallen tree. No one jumped out to meet him with this inconvenience, but he could see the verdure around him, rustling with ambushers, waiting for the exact right moment. With the stirring vegetation around him, the violent chorus of whispers around him began again. They were louder and somewhat clearer than before. He can make out some of their plans to string him up, beating him senseless. The phrase, "catch him, kill him," echoing in his ears. His eyes are blurring as dime-sized droplets of sweat rush down his forehead and flood his eyes. His hands have gone far from clammy, as now he struggles to maintain a grip on the steering wheel. He uses his forearm to wipe away his eyes, only in time to see a shadow standing in the middle of the road. He screams as he swerves, driving off the side of the road and crashing into a tree. He awoke, unsure of how much time had passed, but saw that the sun had already started to drop. He blinks and squints as the sensation of something cooling slowly runs down the side of his face. He reaches up to touch it, and his hand comes back red. Stumbling out of the car, he hears a woman call out, "He's awake! He's getting out of the car." Aaron turns his head to see a woman and a man standing next to their vehicle, parked on the side of the road. He looks to the tinted back windows and sees more of the shadowy figures, their heads turned to look at him. He gasps and looks back to the woman who cried out. Both she and the man carried twisted expressions of tentative eagerness. He knows they believe their time has come to take him, but he'd sooner go on his own terms before he lets them. He runs back in the direction of home, tearing down the street, lightheaded as he was, unsure of how much blood he'd already lost. He knew he just only had to get back home, and he'd be safe. He didn't see those two girls with their mischievous giggles from earlier, but he knew that they couldn't be far. There are several pairs of running footsteps behind him. He can sense them, though he cannot hear them through the tremendous pounding of his hard-pressed heart. The whispers are shouting now, eager and hungry, their hands reaching towards him with greedy claws. He reached his apartment building and dove into the elevator. He slams his fist onto the button for the 4th floor. As the lift slowly rose, the lights flickered and the walls rattled. Aaron raised his hands and clutched his head as the bitter pounding of his attackers assailed the outside of the elevator. The elevator doors open, And Aaron knows that as soon as he steps over the breach between the lift and the apartment floor, a hand should shoot up and grasp his ankle, keeping him immobile until the doors close and crush him. He jumps over it and runs down the hallway until he sees his apartment. Room's door is left ajar, barely an inch, but open nonetheless. Aaron stood paralyzed. Horror tingled up his body like thousands of avid insects. He knows he has to make a choice. Wait for them to reach him out here, or face them off in there. He likes his chances in there better, if only slightly. He runs into the dark room and slams the door behind him. Immediately, he sees the shadows huddled against the walls. They begin their devious whispering. "Here he is," they say. "Get ready. He can't take it. He thought he could, but he can't take it. Not anymore, and never again." With tears streaming down his face, Aaron cries out, "You'll never take me!" With a blood-curdling scream, he begins to run again. The lights turn on. The trap is about to be sprung, and Aaron Newman jumps at the window and plunges 4 stories down to the concrete below. Emma Newman, mother of Aaron Newton, shrieks. Friends and family, who had been hiding in the dark to surprise Aaron on his birthday, all crowd around the shattered window and look down. No one would ever be able to understand what spurred on this paranoia that led to Aaron's death, as all that was found on his person would be his wallet, his old crumbling sneakers, and a fake lottery ticket given as a gag. But that is perhaps the worst part of paranoia, the unknowing, a dark paranoia, the mind's twisted masterpiece, where shadows dance and conspiracies unite to throw a party that only the troubled can attend.